What is going on, guys? My name is Curry Tech and welcome back to the channel and another video coming at you today. And we are going over my AIO, the H100i Pro RGB XT, featuring in Corsair's own lineup of AIOs. In the past, they have made the H100i Pro, which was actually the one I wanted to get back then, but we gone with the H100i Pro RGB XT. And also there's another one in their lineup called the H100i Capellix, which uses a different type of RGB lighting and also comes with different lighting mechanisms as well. So let's go over the H100i Pro RGB XT. So here, I get the box. Put my head. Okay. Oh, that was loud. Anyway, this is the box, as you can see. This is the H100 RGB Pro XT from Corsair's lineup. Black, obviously, to match everything in the build. And now let's see what we can get in the box and what to expect when you get this AIO. So in the AIO, you get the standard 3 types of mounting mechanisms. So right here, we actually have an Intel bracket and mounting plates right here, and also the back plate for LGA 1200 and for Intel socket generations. So this works with almost any Intel CPU generation, as it has a standard mechanism and everything. And this is also STRX bracket for Threadripper. This is used for, you can use AIO for cooling Threadripper. And as you know, Threadrippers run pretty hot. Usually people will not run it on air cool unless you're not overclocking it, obviously. And if you're going to the extreme, you want to water cool that, obviously. But this AIO probably can handle the job for a Threadripper. Obviously not something too crazy of a Threadripper, maybe like a 2nd generation Threadripper or a lower core Threadripper would be fine. But when you get up to those higher end ones on Threadripper, they tend to run a lot hotter because of all the cores and threads. But anyway, moving on from that, those are all the brackets. It supports AM4 as well. That's the one in my build, which I'll be showing later in the video. Now, let's see what also is included in the box. So in the box is actually not only the user manual and brackets, but you also get from Corsair 2 fans. These are PWM, I believe these are maglev 12V DC fans, and they have a standard 4-pin connector coming off of them. Hope you can see that on the camera. This is a 4-pin connector, and well, almost dropped that. And these are standard Corsair fans, non-RGB, obviously, and they do not have ripper corners on them for vibration. So that is one thing to take into account on these fans. These are not premium high quality fans, but they're definitely enough to get some airflow going into your case. Moving on, you have the manual in case you want to know certain things about the AIO. Was it really helpful to me? Not really. It kind of sucked. Now going over the H100i Pro RGB XT, out of the box, we actually can see you get a micro USB cable connected into the pump and 2 fan headers coming off the pump as well. The 2 cables coming off the Ace-Tech cold plate pump is actually 4-pin PWM fans, which is very nice to have in case that you run out of fan headers on the motherboard, or you just don't have enough fan headers in general to actually connect fans. This is all connected in IQ software. I have 4 LL120 fans and also 2 LL120s cooling the radiator at the front of the case. I went with a push configure, or no, not a push, a pull configuration, pulling air into the case through the rad. As I routed the tubes of the AIO downwards. Now, the reason why I routed the tubes downwards is because in terms of longevity of air bubbles, you don't want air bubbles to be at the top, and especially in the H100, the H510, this case, you can only route it 2 ways, really, is having the tubes at the top and then the tubes on the bottom. I went with the tubes on the bottom because it just makes more sense, because I'm going to be using this AIO for a very long time. This is cooling the Ryzen 5 3600 at stock. We will also be showing benchmark performance and numbers as well under load, so at 100% utilization, and also showing graphs on the three presets you can have it on, which are extreme, normal, and quiet, determining which one is better for performance and acoustics. I'll be going over that later in the video and also showing you everything in Corsair's IQ software. Now, the reason why I went with the H100i Pro XT is I actually wanted to go with the H100i Pro, but I couldn't get that because it actually discontinued. Well, not discontinued, but it went up in price because they don't make those ones as much as they make these ones. As you can see on the block, it's a 16 addressable RGB LEDs on the pump. You can set that into the IQ software to whatever color you want. I went a yellow and white kind of theme to make this case a Pikachu themed PC build. I really love it. I have Corsair RAM. I just kind of got it with the bundle with my Ryzen 5 3600. I will say I wish I routed the AIO cables a little bit better, so not having that one kind of coming over the mounting block, but I can fix that when I add more components to the system anyway down the line. But overall, this keeps my Ryzen 5 3600 very cool, 6 cores, 12 threads. And if I was to upgrade it down the line to maybe say a 3900X, maybe not in this motherboard, but maybe another motherboard as well, then this AIO definitely can keep it well maintained under load, especially in games. You're not going to be using 100% utilization on all cores and threads. Only in Cinebench R23, which we'll be going over later, and also some other benchmarks where we show the CPU at full load. The highest it can probably get under gaming load is around 53 degrees Celsius when I play Black Ops 3, Phasmophobia, maybe some other games I play as well, Battlefront, and I just hit the camera. And to be honest with you, it's a very nice AIO. The mounting mechanism for me is what kind of threw me off at first, because it uses the AM4 mounting bracket, which is totally fine as long as you don't throw it away. I actually threw my old motherboard one away, so thank God I had this one lying around. And getting this on is kind of finicky, but it took a little while, and especially the instructions in this doesn't really make it clear. So what you're supposed to do is actually the two thumb screws on it, you have to barely put them on, and then as you put them onto the hooks onto each clip of the AM4 bracket, you put one on the other side, one on the other side as well. In the manual, it doesn't tell you to do this. It's very unclear. So at first I put it on wrong. I accidentally tightened both sides too much, not allowing me to make equal contact onto the CPU. So it kind of pissed me off at first, and it's very confusing, especially if you're first building a PC. So maybe not as consumer friendly as it should have been, but I would really like to see a more sturdier AM4 mounting bracket for it. I know some other companies for AIOs make it into having the four sides kind of like a cross, sort of like the Intel mounting bracket. It may take a little bit more work to put it on, but I definitely like that route better than this one. But once you get the hang of actually putting this AM4 bracket on, then it's definitely pretty simple once you do know it. In terms of actual connectors to this AIO runs at the quietest of 2000 RPM and the highest of 2600 RPM. You can set that in the IQ software, and also has a 3-pin fan pump connector, so you can connect that into your CPU optional header or CPU 1 header, any fan header you have. Coming off the block is actually a 3-pin PWM fan pump header that controls the speed through the motherboard. So in the BIOS, it actually might read at 4000 RPM at first, but it's actually running at like 2000 RPM. It just reads that at 4000 for some reason in the BIOS. And also you have to connect a, I believe, a USB on the bottom as well to control it, I believe. Yes. I kind of forgot because I haven't been back in my system on the backside of it for a while. But overall, it's a very reliable AIO, very quiet. In terms of the fans And the AIO, I don't really hear it a lot, but I do hear like a noise. Like I hear some type of noise, obviously. So there might be other alternatives to this AIO per se, as there might be a lot quieter than this. I don't have any decibel readings, sorry, but PC Part Picker, I believe this says it's a 37 dB AIO, and some other ones that I've read can go from 19 dB to 37 dB. At quiet, this thing is pretty loud, but not extremely loud. So, all in all, it's a very good AIO, very reliable. Um, the one thing I actually have to go over is the addressable RGB, headers. Well, not the addressable RGB headers, the block RGB. So the problem I had was I accidentally connected the SATA power coming off of this as well. So there's a SATA power to connect it, and then the micro USB, the two fan headers, and then the third PWM fan header. There's a lot of cables coming off of this block for just one AIO. And I accidentally connected the SATA power, which powers on the LEDs, into a Molex to SATA plug. So when I did that, I connected it to the Molex to female adapter, and it didn't. The LEDs, when I first turned on the system, it didn't turn on for some reason. So I was like, why is it not turning on? You know, is it broken or something? So then I kind of do some digging around the internet, and I look at this one post, and it says, if you're using the SATA power plug, make sure you plug it into a SATA power off your power supply, as that gives it enough voltage, because the Molex to female SATA plug doesn't give it enough voltage to actually turn it on. And as I did that, I plugged it into my power supply SATA, and it worked. So thank you, internet, for that, especially Reddit. But overall, it's a great AIO. I do say if you want to go with the air cooler, that's a little bit cheaper. Definitely go with that, especially if you're on the budget. But if you're going for a more aesthetically pleasing build, maybe $2,000, $1,500, you can probably put an AIO in here in your system if you really wanted to. I also have my Funko Pop in there as well. If I could add more custom stuff, I'll also maybe put a back plate, change the RAM out to maybe try and G Skill. I've always liked those kits of RAM as well. But overall, it's great AIO. Honestly, I don't know what else to say about it. Runs very nice. I mean, the only problem I had was the mounting of the AIO. It comes up with pre-applied thermal paste as well. So definitely, if you don't have any thermal paste lying around, this is definitely going to be enough for you. Now, are there other choices out there? Yes, there's the NZXT. There's Fractal Design. They have like the Ice series or whatever. And MSI also makes AIOs. There's a lot of AIOs out there here. So, it's up to personal preference, right? Now, as you can see on screen, we have the IQ software from Corsair open. This is a very nice software to use for RGB, but if you're going with Corsair, there are a lot of third-party connectors and just unnecessary connectors that Corsair uses. They don't use standard RGB connectors, so they use their own proprietary connectors in this. So on screen, when you connect all these fans together, I have the Commander Pro in the back of my case, and that goes into my motherboard via USB 3.0 cable on the bottom of the motherboard. And this allows me to control everything, including the color of the fans, how fast the fans go, the fan curves. So I don't have to go to the motherboard and change the fan curve settings, which is kind of nice, but also $50 for a Commander Pro is not cheap either. So you can connect up to 6 fans with the Commander Pro, and let's go into it. I have my 4 fans set to a custom performance of 700 RPM under load. The system doesn't get on under load that much, and it's also tied to the temperature of my Ryzen 5 3600. Now, what we're here for actually is my AIO. Now, once you have the AIO set up with all the cables in and everything, what you will find is that you can see the 2 fan headers coming off. I don't have anything connected to these 2 fan headers, so they come up at 0 RPM, obviously. There are also very different custom fan profiles. You have quiet, balanced, extreme, and 0 RPM. So 0 RPM depending on the load, on the motherboard and everything. Since I have no fans connected to these, the pumps, PWM fan connectors, there is nothing showing up in the software, which is exactly right. Now going to the pump, there are actually 3 profiles you can put on it: quiet, balanced, and extreme. You cannot put your own custom one on, which sucks a little bit to me, but it's fine. You can put quiet on, which drops it down to under 2000 RPM compared to extreme, which goes up to 2600 RPM. This will depend on whether you're not running benchmarks or you want your CPU to run a little bit cooler under load, especially when you're doing synthetic benchmarks. When I go to extreme, I don't really notice it sounding a lot louder. It does make a quite little bit more sound than compared to quiet, but I don't notice it as much as you would on a kind of fan controlled air cooler. So when those fans ramp up to a higher speed, you can definitely hear it. Compared to an AIO, it's very quiet. Spinning at 2600 RPM pump, that is very nice. Keeps my CPU very cool. Anyway, let's move on to the end of the video. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you, and peace out.